Good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Hernandez. I head up the Government Affairs and Sustainability at Corteva Agriscience. For those who don't know, we're this new company as of June 1st, 2019 that came out of Dow and DuPont merging and then spinning its agriculture division. So we like to think of ourselves as a startup with 200 years of history. But the group that I had to step in for Fitri this afternoon, 10 minutes before, or this morning, 10 minutes before we had to start. So with apologies, but we tried to make it work and to share what the staple crops group did for today and this afternoon. And in particular, looking at increasing the productivity, agricultural productivity of our smallholder farmers, increasing their income. And then the third one was about ensuring diversity of the seeds, the genetic diversity. So those are the three areas, and the third one in particular was the hardest. But I'll start from what we started with, agriculture productivity. One of the things I want to, I think all of us probably share that, is that we had hoped to have a multi-sectoral discussion and dialogue with government, private sector, and civil society. And unfortunately, we did not have any government representative in our room. And I think that might be the case for most of us. So we tried to do our best to think of what the three together could do. The first thing that we shared is to focus on the farmer, the smallholder farmer, and put him or her at the center of our discussion. Because if we do that, and if we think of changing the way we look at the farmer, and change it in the sense of looking at the farmer as an entrepreneur, as a businessman or businesswoman, it changes some of the things that we do around him or her. And one of the quotes yesterday in the discussion in our group was, the quote I think many of you would have heard, teach men, or give men a fish and he eats for a day or for that meal, but teach men to fish and they can eat for a lifetime. And so that's kind of what we ended up doing, is saying, let's not focus on the farmer as this poor farmer that you have to help, and we're all kind of looking at how to give things to the farmer. Rather, if we step back and think of the farmer as an entrepreneur, how do we empower that farmer to have all the available tools, knowledge, and at his or her disposal? Because if they do have access to the best technologies, financing, and the knowledge and training, they will be the best stewards of the land, and they will make the best decisions to get to the agricultural productivity that we want. So that was the first thing I think I heard from the discussions this afternoon. And then reviewing all the best practices and case studies already today. Yesterday and today, we heard some great stories of what's already happening on the ground here and the many islands of Indonesia. And so it's not that we don't know, but there are pockets of great ideas and with great impact that's coming out of those projects, that if we actually collect all that and look at them and kind of do an audit of where are the gaps and what are some of the common areas or elements of these training programs, of these different case studies, that we can then learn from and design kind of a model so that we can replicate that and scale it up across the country. And that's where the role of government really comes in, being able to help us to do this, because there's great private, public, and civil society partnerships already going on the ground, but how do we ensure that we're able to share that with the government and help us scale it across Indonesia, across different crops, whether that's in rice, the most important one that most of us were concerned about, and there's some challenges in, as well as in corn and other staple crops. So that's kind of what we focus on productivity. But the key is working as a value chain, right? Because we recognize that there's so many gaps in that value chain. And part of the reason, especially for us on the input provider side, no matter how much we do in supporting that training program to improve the productivity of our farmers, if they don't have access to the market, then that doesn't translate to improving their profitability or their income. So if we're gonna do that, all that we have to go across the value chain. And many of the success stories we heard yesterday and today were around different organizations and local governments and NGOs coming together and having a program that started from, the producer, the inputs, the financing, the off-takers, so that they were able to have that connection to the market. And once you have that connection to the market, that's why the financing comes in, whether it's insurance or crop insurance or other microfinance instruments. So those are some of the things that we discuss. And in fact, that piece on increasing the income, it really comes down to defining the living wage. I think today we're still not consistent or clear on what exactly that looks like. Being able to, that's kind of a short-term output that we can really get and agree on. And then if we have that metric, then we'll be able to move forward in then leveraging some of the things that the government has, let's say the subsidies that we heard about yesterday. How do we leverage those subsidies with financial bodies like the insurance companies and banks to create those financing instruments for our smallholder farmers? And then long-term, taking that into the broader enabling environment and working with the government to really ensure that the overall enabling environment of that ecosystem allows all the different parties, private sector, NGOs, local and national government level to participate in that ecosystem.
Okay.
So those were some of the discussions that we had.
Elizabeth, for someone that misplaced their notes between the breakout room and here, that was an exceptional summary. Thank you. And we'll move now from the left to the right to Raoul and onwards. Raoul.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Raoul Oberman. I think I'm here on behalf of being a board member of PIS Agro. And in my other time, I'm launching a social tech app. Artemis, you can talk about me when you want to, off the record. I had the honor of following up to Dr. Bayou, representing and coordinating the group on high-value crops, cacao, coffee, and palm. And we would have not come to the result we had if I had not been fully strongly supported by Stephen, who's sitting there, who should have been sitting here and taking the blame for the results. But me being Dutch, he being British, I'm sitting here. That's what happened. Having said all that, I think we had an impressive group. We came up around our 3 crops with 10 initiatives. But given the limited time, we went through a very democratic voting, and we ended up, and it was democratic, I think, in spite of a Dutch and a Brit rigging it, to 2 initiatives. And the one initiative, and it's very much resounding to what you had, it's all about, if there are 2 things we want the government and the private sector to put their hands around, is building strong communities of smallholders in such a way that there are 4 capabilities they can build. The one capability is really source inputs well. Secondly is the SOPs, the standard operating procedure, how to get those right. Market access and then funding. And to do that well, for the first area, we thought in the short term, the kind of actions that the government should have, and we have here a very nice thing on that. First of all, we believe we need baseline. The government over the next 12 months should baseline specific needs, capture the best SOPs, particularly for coffee and cacao, because we think for palm it's already quite well cooked. And then also look for existing best practices of how to do this community building and the barriers. Secondly, we would love to create a heat map and we estimated roughly our 60,000 communities, that every community should probably choose which are the kind of capabilities it would really like to emphasize on. Particularly that would then increase ownership. And thirdly, by the end of the year, we know we have a high-performing government now in place, launch tests of agents of change models. That would then allow us, then for the longer term, to emphasize and reach 4 things. The first thing is build market access at scale. Some of our members were very adamant. If farmers know they can sell, they will move. So make that happen. Particularly also then allowing for matchmaking with the private sector regional. Second, range of funding. The whole area about mixed funding. And then being able not only to find the options, but the matchmaking happens. Built on that, skills can be built. And finally, we think in terms of institutional building, but we think we need crop-specific vocational academies. And all of that we will give ourselves about 7 or 8 years. That was the first area. The second area was deep diving on the whole financing. And this group, as you see, was led by me. Wow. I couldn't really summarize things very well. Yeah. So I take the blame for that. Stephen, you hear me? I'm taking your... Yes. I'm taking the blame for that. What we need there is also baselining. What we do think we very quickly need is a conference to get everybody around the table of what is the right kind of financing and blended finance that can be done. And thirdly, we think we need a standard tool of measuring inputs. If you're a crowdsourcer, you're a peer-to-peer platform or a bank, you do want to know whom you're giving the money to. And then we also need very good monitoring, not only on ROE, but on NPLs. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's non-performing loans, the stuff that's not being paid back. Then in the medium term, what we want to get to is frankly getting certification to a level that it is not only empowered, and we will take the approach that is done in the timber trade over 17 years and force everybody to do the certification, but also make sure in terms of fair trade that the money really gets back to the farmers. And the last point I would like to just pick up on this is that we would then in the longer term want to be able to do real carbon credit funding and be able to then get about between $2 and $10 billion annually flowing into this country, going straight to the smallholders that deserve it. Thank you very much.
Raoul, wonderful, wonderful. Just a reminder, the purpose of the process here is to feed into the national plan.
So this was a polite suggestion, not a request for
incredibly Dutch and polite, not very direct. We appreciate that. So that was wonderful. I'll move along now to Regina. 2 to 3 minutes, 5 at tops.
Sure, no problem. 2 minutes to summarize a 1 day and a half discussion.
Easy. Come on.
Easy
we
peasy.
want some German efficiency now,
yeah,
please.
well, okay, serious. So just to remind everybody, we are here under the SDG2, and under the SDG2 we have 4 indicators that are for malnutrition. I'm the malnutrition person. So we in our group, and I hope I really do justice to the group because I don't have notes, I'm just coming off from a very inspiring discussion. We worked around the indicator of stunting. I have to say that please do not forget that undernourishment, wasting and overweight are also important indicators and unfortunately still high problems in Indonesia. So let's not forget about them. But let's concentrate on stunting. So what we did is we had 3 tables, very intense discussions, very democratic of course, but very clear with the line. I'm the facilitator. So we came up with actually 3 initiatives which I then merged into one because basically it was one big initiative. And it's the following, and please bear with me quickly. So the main initiative, the title would be to increase awareness, to make a campaign on raising awareness about stunting. And under this campaign, we would have different pillars. And one important pillar is the harmonization of policy, which at the moment you have a discrepancy between national policy and district policy. To achieve this, because we know that we give recommendations or, to the government, by doing this, we would like to institutionalize inclusive platforms where actually everybody needs to be at the table, you want it or not, private sector, industry, government, everybody. And those inclusive platforms should be held in the different levels at the national, also at district, at mayor level, and they should be put in such a way that they will survive elections. And that gives you a stability. And we would also like to recommend that successful initiatives who actually have done similar activities should be looked at, like for example, you can take successful examples from the sanitation sector, because Indonesia has adopted some platforms and some institutionalized mechanisms. So that's one. And we also then have in this campaign, we have, as I said, different pillars, but we also have already a pillar where we would go and have a pilot project, which we would propose, because we have in the room important player Bullock, and they actually will bring forward fortified rice, which is one of the complementary strategies. It's not the silver bullet, but it is part of the overarching initiative. And coupled this with already existing mayors, Bupati, who are already won over to really do something against stunting. And that would serve as a pilot project, which we then hope under this bigger initiative could be scaled up. The other pillars which would come out of the collaborative work that would be done under this campaign are, of course, the sanitation, the education, breast milk awareness, etc., local employers to embrace maternity leave, and so on. So it's the package, but the hook for getting this package out is really an overarching nationwide campaign to raise the awareness about stunting and to also raise the awareness what can be done to actually reduce stunting. I think I will stop there.
Regina, thank you. Very concise, without notes again. Let's wrap up. Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Group 3, livestock, poultry, fishery, and aquaculture. We have two tables. Table number 1 talk about tengkulak, middleman. Table 2, we talk about broiler farming, talk about improve agriculture, output, productivity, and income of smallholder farmers. I'm not so sure if you are all aware, but broilers is a big industry for Indonesia. Indonesia has about 3.5 billion day-old chick broilers a year. That's according to the data of Ministry of Agriculture. When we talk about malnutrition or stunting, broiler meat or chicken meat actually has a very good protein, calorie, and vitamin B6, and can play important role in this part. Why consumption is low? Consumption per capita in Indonesia for broiler meat is low. Why? Because the price maybe is not affordable for everyone. But why the price is expensive? Because production cost is high. Why production cost is high? There are several factors. Among others is inefficiency. Productivity is low. Why productivity is low? Because farmers, our farmers, smallholder farmers, raise broilers in open house system, open-sided system. You can only place 8 birds, 8 chickens per square meter, versus if you place birds in closed house farming system, you can place per square meter up to 20. So what we discuss is that we would like to have this multi-stakeholders partnership to enable smallholder farmers to own their closed house broiler system. Then they can, later definitely improve their income. So we have these two major goals. How we are gonna do in short term? In short term, number 1, we need to form or establish partnership. We want to start with university as our number 1 partner, reputable university. Then number 2, we need government. There is no way we can do something without the support from the government. We need MOA, Ministry of Agriculture. We need MOF, Ministry of Finance. We need state-owned banks, because we need loan to build closed house broiler farm we need loan. That's not cheap. So who else need to be on board? Local government, Kabupaten, Bupati, who issue permit to build the house. We will build house with permit, not illegal building house. Number 4, we need farmers association, small-scale farmers association, smallholder farmers association. Then we need key players in the industry, large corporations. Last but not least, we need NGO, we need civil society, we need FAO to be also together. After our expectation, we can do this in relatively short notice, short period, not that long. Then step number 2, we need to identify. At least we can have 4 to 5, just take 5 locations, 5 groups. If 5, one broiler house, 2-story, you can place 40,000 birds. Just take small example, smallholder farmers has 5,000 birds per person. So you can have 8 farmers per house. You have 5 houses, so 8 multiplied by 5. So you have 40 farmers, 40 smallholder farmers. Then we count within 6 months, with the support of all these stakeholders, we can build the house in 5 different locations. Also with the support from key players. There are several players, large corporation in this business. Then let's say in the second semester of 2020, we can have the production, estimated around 600,000 broilers by end of 2020. Then next, what we want to do. This closed house broiler system is seen not as a good solution to improve productivity, because a lot of farmers cannot afford it. So what they do, they are against this idea. In order to move forward, we need the support from the university. So university, together with other stakeholders, should develop research or project to compare, the open-sided house farming and in this project locations. The actual, not data from large corporation. Then, they can do this and then sharing knowledge. So we expect in this midterm that this more and more projects can be done. That's from the group. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank the panel. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's wrap this up. Eh?
I thought we were going to.
Very well. I'm getting.
Thank you indeed. Just before we wrap up, we have a signing ceremony. Yesterday I introduced the concept of a pledge of commitment towards food system transformation in Indonesia. If we can bring the table up here, I'd like to invite to the stage here with me Bapak Zulfriandi from BAPPENAS and Mr. Tony Gourlay, CEO of Global Initiatives, to sign the pledge. Congratulations all.
Want some more photographs for your Facebook page? It's like the paparazzi out there, isn't it? Okay. I'd now like to invite Stephen Rudgard, who's the UN representative for Indonesia, to join me on stage to offer some closing remarks. And while Stephen's coming up here, this is happening live. We're about to launch a new website on the 1st of December. We'd encourage you to go along there where you can track progress, you can read about your inputs towards the National Development Plan. So this will go live December 1st. If you'd like to jot down, I think it's .com or is it .org? It's .com. So SDG2Impact.com. Okay, where's Stephen? Getting mine done. You're live.
Am I alone up here?
Do you want to come to the podium? Or, look at this, yes. Why don't you take this one?
No, I'll sit. Stay. I'll feel very lonely up here if you go away. Oh, well, there you go.
Okay, so Stephen, you've been to many of these events over the years. What are your thoughts, comments, feedback of the last 2 days?
I don't think, thank you very much. First of all, I'm honoured and slightly overawed at being the one up here. I had hoped there might be someone else to share some findings. I haven't actually been through a meeting like this before. Anita said it, and I refer back to her as the UN resident coordinator in her opening words on the first day, yesterday, that actually it's quite unusual to have the UN logo here with the private sector. We're very used to being with the government. That's where we're comfortable. But then to have the private sector in here in this sort of way, our Secretary General would be proud. Our UNRC, Anita, is absolutely adamant that we need to be doing more of this. We need to be working more with the private sector. Our natural partner is government. We are an intergovernmental entity. We trade on our neutrality, our ability to convene, and our technical expertise, our normative role. Those are our comparative advantages. And what's important about the SDGs is although they were sort of invented in the UN, they're actually belonging to everybody. And delivery on the SDGs is entirely a community-based concept, which means if it's not the private sector on board, it isn't going to work. Government creates an enabling environment, as we were hearing from the panel up here. That's what it needs to do. But too often, as business tries to do its job, and we all understand business actually has a profit motive. I mean, let's be honest. Businesses are not charities. They have a profit motive. If they don't make a profit, they can't exist. At that same point, they shouldn't be making an exploitative. And most businesses in the longer term do not, or they wouldn't survive. So what I believe we have to reflect on from this agenda and these outputs, I don't have the detail on the other three outputs. I only have the detail from the very ably reported group that was working on the commodity crops. And I think we need to reflect a little bit on what now? What do we do with the output of this meeting? Now, I haven't had a chance to brainstorm very much with the organizers about what now. We certainly didn't occupy the time of nearly 200 people for 2 days just to write a nice report. that nobody came to this meeting just to participate and have the excellent food and drink the coffee. They came here in order to exchange ideas, but also to try and establish an agenda. The trouble with such an agenda is the way the meeting has run, it's been primarily driven by the private sector. Government has been here, in and out, but it's not really been a government meeting. So I think we have to reflect, all of us, on this, the output that we take from this meeting, which I believe there's been some very sincere commentary from the private sector stakeholders that are here on what they believe are the blocks for them as they try to contribute to achieving the SDG2. And on that basis, that's a perceptual thing. What does the private sector see are the problems? It's not a UN perspective, but we've been here and we've learned a lot from this meeting. Just talk to Krista, my WFP colleague who is here today, working with the Malnutrition group. She said, my perspectives were not where the private sector was sitting. That's fine. We are different. Let us bring our perspective into a discussion in the same way that the private sector will bring theirs. But if we look at the agriculture sector and the food sector, in Indonesia, I'm not going to take other countries, I'm talking about Indonesia now, we have a tranche of new ministers. Some of them actually are the same. Tomorrow I have my first post-nomination meeting with the minister in charge of the Ministry of Agrarian and Spatial Affairs, the land agency. Land sort of came up here, but for me it's a fundamental precept. If we don't have title, we can't trade. Same minister, challenging agenda, taking points. What I want to do is take the points that are arising from this meeting, encapsulate them well, so there's a report writing phase to happen now, to digest this into something which can really be traded as a set of ideas. It isn't the definitive action plan for SDG2. We were never trying, I think, to achieve the definitive national action plan for SDG2. But let us offer this as a set of contributions from a very concerned and involved group of stakeholders who want to contribute to the achievement of SDG2 in Indonesia. And the transformation that the sector has got to go through in the next 5-10 years for 2030 is really fundamental. If you listen to the narratives in the groups, you see the changes that are going to have to happen, even to get us close. It's not trivial. We talked about the social aspect. We're going to have to really, even issues like land consolidation, they're politically very, very hot. Social behavior change in terms of diets. This isn't a trivial thing when people don't have the money to access the diet that they would, in principle, be having. So we have to do more multi-stakeholder events to take this output and bring it to government in a non-confrontational way. It's not like we're preaching. We're not queuing up to give government in a download way what we think is a good idea. And that's why I think it's been important that the UN had a stake in this meeting. And what I would like to propose is then we do think about collectively those main representative stakeholders, the what next, to take the outputs from this meeting and put them into the processes that are happening in different parts of the sector. Because I believe the new government is actually, for the next few months, doing this and setting its plans. The RPJMN, they call it a technocratic form. In the next 2 or 3 months, it's going to move into a political form and be adopted by the ministers that are now in their seats. We have a window to bring some of the messages that this meeting has put on the paper. So we're not going to sleep. Is that fair?
Absolutely, yeah.
The deck chair will be put aside for the moment.
Yeah.
Will not be by the pool. We're going to take this forward, and I'm sure Tony would be leading the torch on that. From our side, I want to thank Tony and all his team, which is not a trivial team when you look around the room and realize how many people he's actually put on the plate here, and certain other individuals. Who have put a lot of shoe leather and brain power into putting this meeting together. It's taken agility with the shifting membership of the stakeholder group that's here to keep the show rolling. But I think it's been valuable from my perspective. I hope others agree. And these meetings are an inordinate amount of work. Nobody really understands till you've organized a meeting like this how much work it takes. So really a strong vote of thanks. And to all of you that took your time, those of us who were here yesterday but didn't come today, those of us who were here this morning but weren't here this afternoon, everyone has contributed, and I think it's been a very valuable process. I've learned a lot, I can tell you, and fully intend to make the most out of what we're taking away from here. So let's congratulate each other. And to thank BAPPENAS for sponsoring this and giving us the space to do it, and giving us the government anchor for providing that real audience, because we need an audience in government. And BAPPENAS is the owner of the RPJMN. That's what we have to remember. If we're going to influence, it's BAPPENAS that is our point of entry. So thanks very much. I hope I've summed up what people wanted to hear. And let's go home with a smile. How about that?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Steve. Okay, you may all go home or stay for a drink. I think, is Tony sponsoring drinks in the bar? No, joke. Okay, thank you. Thank you all. There we go.